Good evening and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. Love Bay family, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. Our topic on this evening is boundaries. We're talking about boundaries again. We have with us Jennifer Peterkin, our co-host, the host of The Human Experience. We have Nicole Tillman and Mark Doria. We want to start with just greeting you all on tonight, but afterwards, Nicole's going to share some resources. So with that, Nicole, if you could go first with greeting our listeners and viewers on tonight.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Nicole Tillman. Let's see. I don't even know what to say about myself today. I'm an up and coming author. I am a lover of Jesus, and I provide mentoring to young adults right now. And I have a worship service that I do once a month called Sacred Spaces. So it's pretty good.
Beautiful. Mark?
Good evening, Love Bay community. I'm Mark Daria here, and I don't know how I can top that. That history before me. I just really don't know. But I'm a teacher and an analyst, and love doing both. And hopefully, co-hosting this now for a bit, and been a guest before that, and hopefully helping people to figure out things just a little bit better.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jen?
Hello, Love Bay. So glad to be back once again with Tia and my lovely co-hosts. I am Jen. I have been a domestic violence advocate for, it'll be almost 10 years now. So, and a domestic violence survivor as well. I've been working with Tia for several years and just really appreciate all of the work that she does and that we're able to do together. So, as Tia said, I do have a podcast called The Human Experience that is on all major podcast platforms.
Thank
Awesome.
you. So, Nicole?
Okay. So we are in the process of raising funds for our nonprofit, Rise Out of the Ashes Incorporated. If you would like to make a tax-deductible donation, you can do so through our GoFundMe fundraiser, or you can write a check made payable to Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc. at P.O. Box 15, which is Drexel Hill, PA 19026. One of our endeavors is providing immediate emergency funding, such as doctor's visits, transportation, food, clothing, school supplies, medication, personal toiletries, utilities, rent, mortgage payments, and education. Some of our resources are the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Help Hotline. Their number is 800-662-4357. There is the Befrienders Volunteer Action and Prevention Suicide. To find helpline by country, you can visit their website at www.friendfinders.org. There's the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is www.hotline.org, and their number is 1-800-799-7233. We have the Canadian Women's Foundation, which is canadianwomen.org, at 1-866-293-4483. And their email is info@canadianwomen.org. We also have UK National Domestic Abuse Helpline, which is their website is www.nationaldahelpline.org.uk. Their number is 080820000247. And one more, you can also visit the Women's Aid, which is www.womensaid.org.uk.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. So again, Love Bay, our topic on tonight is boundaries. And so I want to start by sharing a couple of definitions of boundaries. And then I don't want to throw you on the spot, Mark, but after these definitions, we want to hear what you have to say. So as I specifically wanted to share two definitions. I wanted to share a definition of boundaries in a normal, healthy setting. And then I wanted to share the definition of boundaries that we would hear in an abusive setting. So from Psychology Today, and this is from February 10th, 2026, boundaries is setting healthy boundaries can be a way of preserving one's mental health and well-being. It means knowing what one wants and expects from the people in their life and what they'll accept from them, and then clearly, concisely, and calmly stating those ground rules. Partners must clearly state a boundary, enforce it by reminding the other when they violated it, and not reward boundary crossing behavior. Again, that's a definition of boundaries in a normal, healthy setting. So, our definition in an abusive setting, this is from Michael Samsel. Michael has a website called abuseandrelationships.org. Michael is a licensed mental health counselor, and he wrote this some time ago. Boundaries are essential in all relationships, including domestic ones, to protect physical, emotional, and mental well being. They allow individuals to set limits on what they will or will not tolerate, ensuring comfort and security. Consent is an ongoing process that requires active and voluntary agreement at every step of interaction, particularly in intimate situations. Disregarding boundaries or consent is often a sign of unhealthy or abusive behavior. Recognizing these signs early is critical to protecting personal safety and well-being. And I love that definition, that description of boundaries. So before we go to Mark, I do want to start by saying, ordinarily, you don't need permission to set boundaries in your life. You just do what is best for you. But there are situations, and we're talking about abuse, there are situations when a victim or survivor has to make the best choice for themselves that won't put them in any further danger. So you have to do what you are safe to do. So I want to point that out. So even as we're talking about caring for ourselves and stating what we will or will not take, what we will or will not deal with, we're talking about boundaries in an abusive relationship. We really have to keep in mind what is safe for you to do. So with that, Mark, I want to toss you the mic.
Thank you. And you probably picked me for this because you know that I love to have definitions, right? Because so that we know that's my boundary. We need to know what it is that we're actually talking about. So yeah, no, and that's great because it I love what you did there because you talked about healthy and unhealthy. And I do think that healthy relationships have boundaries and so do, and of course unhealthy ones should. So where to go with that? I mean, the word that keeps popping into my head is assertiveness. And we need to be assertive, particularly in unhealthy situations. The whole idea of boundaries is there to protect the individual within that relationship. It's essentially dictating what you're comfortable and not comfortable with and willing to tolerate. So there are mental, there are emotional, there are physical boundaries. So again, parsing it out into different pieces. But again, what I want to emphasize is the need to be assertive in this, to put yourself and say, what is my limitation? Because it's not going to be universal. What some people are willing to tolerate is not what other people might be willing to tolerate. And what is the benefit of this? Besides encouraging independence, promoting mutual respect. Again, that's more of a healthy side of it. But it's clear definitions of what can be tolerated. And communication, as we've discussed on many other topics, communication is key. And so by laying out what you're willing to accept and what your expectations are, is helping to define the nature of the relationship. And when you see those boundaries being disregarded or crossed, it's speaking volumes about what that person is thinking about you or intends for you. And again, objectivity in this, right? We need to have, I never want to, I know I've said this before, I'm an optimistic realist. I've had people who have called me a pessimist, and I get really, that's the one thing that really bothers me, because I'm not a pessimist, not by any definition of the term. But I am an optimistic realist. I want the best, but I'm always looking at things and saying, is this really what's going to get me here? And a lot of times it's not. And so when it's not, you have to be willing to cut the string.
Mhm.
And that's difficult. That's difficult, but it's knowing yourself, and it's being able to recognize the other side of the equation, or the other person, for who and what they are, not what we want them to be. So with that, I'll stop.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that. I love what you said about being assertive. And I I really believe, especially when we're talking about being in a relationship or friendship or whatever it is that has the tone of being abusive, I really believe that that abusive person, that perpetrator, already has an idea of what he or she wants to get out of you or get out of the relationship. So I do believe that before you even set a boundary, before you even like really get into a groove of what a relationship is or what it's going to be, I think some people try you. I think they try you to see how
Absolutely.
far they can push you, how far can I go, like how can I really, speak disrespectfully, how many times can I raise my voice, or how high can I raise it before he or she says something, how many times can I take your keys and put them somewhere else and say that I'm playing a game before you do anything, or if you do or say anything about it. So I think there are times when people try you, and then after you're tried, then that's when you have to, okay, put your foot down. Like we're not doing this. This conversation is not going to go this way. You need to bring it down a couple octaves, or we're not going to do it this way.
Right.
So I think sometimes you have a moment where you can think, and you can put your thoughts together, and you can really have a conversation and say, this is what I want, this is what will work for me, and by that same token, let me know what will work for you. But then I think there are times when somebody will just catch you off guard because they're trying you, and then you just have to either put an end to it or correct it right then and there, no matter what the cost. So if that means that we lose this relationship because I have to correct you on how you're speaking to me, then it's gone. And that's what it is. I think part of boundaries, and Nicole, I'll ask you for your thought on it. I think part of boundaries is a huge part is respecting you and loving you, and being able to walk away from a situation that's not adding to you in a healthy way. If you're not going to be my friend, fine, but you're not going to speak to me this way. If you're going to take the job because I'm demanding that you respect me, then I'll go work somewhere else. So I think we have to love ourselves enough to stand up, and especially when we're dealing with abuse, because wherever it starts, it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. If you start off yelling at me, your voice isn't going to get quieter. If you start off calling me names, it's not going to be, something sweet after that. So that's my thought. Nicole?
Yeah, I would say that's exactly what it is. You have to have respect for yourself and love yourself. And if you find that you don't have that, find ways to learn to have more value on who you are. Because a lot of times I think when you succumb to these type of situations where your boundaries are being pushed or they're being overstepped, it's because you're putting more value on the other person than you are on yourself. So making sure that you're saying, like, no, I'm going to choose me. And I'm going to put myself first, like you said, no matter what the cost is. And that's not easy. It takes a lot of courage. It takes bravery to stand up and say, no, you're not going to talk to me like that. No, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. I can recall a couple of conversations I was with people who were friends at the time, and they raised their voice. And I said, oh, no, we don't do that. I don't know if that's how you're used to communicating, but I don't do that. So either you bring it down and we can have a conversation after that, or I'm gonna leave because this is just not this is my boundary. We're not doing that. So I think that those are keys that you have to learn to not only love yourself but also respect yourself and put more value on your own person of who you are.
Yes. So thank you so much for sharing that. Jen, one of the things in Michael's definition that I absolutely love is this sentence. It says consent is an ongoing process that requires active and voluntary agreement at every step of interactions. Boundaries are always there. And sometimes they change, but boundaries is something that, like Michael said, an ongoing process. So we're always going to pay attention to this. It's always going to be here. Once I said it, it doesn't mean that it disappears or go away because I'm not constantly saying it. The one time I said it, the one time I made this clear, like that's the ground rule right there. But it's an ongoing process. Sometimes you need to revisit it. I think sometimes there are boundaries that, you can say, all right, this has served its purpose. Now I can change it. Now we can grow beyond it, or now we can remove it. Sometimes it's this isn't working, so I have to do something maybe more strenuous. Maybe I have to, add a bit more to this layer. But I just love how he said consent it's an ongoing process. We're always in it. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I mean, big fan of consent. So I like that. But I think that one of the things that really, so I love boundaries. If you've attended Love Bay radio shows for the past 5 years, it's become something of a buzzword here. We love our boundaries. Even though I still struggle setting them as a compulsive people pleaser, but recognizing the importance of them. One of the things that I have seen play out over the last specifically 10 years within advocacy and, in myself going through therapy and healing and stuff is how, when something becomes popular, it can quickly, and it's good, it can also be used as something bad too. And so I think one thing that has come up recently in recent years is the weaponization of boundaries. And one thing that is important for boundaries, and that you alluded to, Tia, is that they are ongoing and they can change. And so, it's important to be constantly checking in with yourself, to make sure that you're setting boundaries for the right reason, and that the boundaries are about you and not about trying to control somebody else or trying to punish somebody else, but that they're because for your own safety, for your own well-being and health. Boundaries should make you safer and better and more confident. They shouldn't make other people afraid or feel like they don't have their own voice. And so it's hard. It can be a really hard thing to navigate sometimes, because I think we throw out this word boundaries and it's so big. Like it really is so encompassing and so many layers to it and so many nuances to it. And anybody that thinks that they can just like slap one, this is how you do it and walk away and like that's the end of the conversation is lying, because it's not. We are complex. We are made of multitudes, and so these processes are also complex and made of multitudes. So I think it's important to constantly be checking in with yourself. Be checking in with people that you trust about this type of thing. Like be honest about where you're at and what boundaries you're setting. If you're afraid to communicate them with somebody, it could be that it's just like something you're struggling with. It could also be because it's something that's not really fair. It's not really a boundary. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to complicate an already complicated thing, but I do think it's worth saying that like these are ongoing conversations. They should be ongoing thought processes. You shouldn't necessarily just feel like, all right, on this day, February 20th, 2026, I officially set my boundaries and that's it in perpetuity. Like, I don't need to visit this again.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing it. And that it reminded me of another point that Michael actually made. He pointed out the difference between control and boundaries is that control is meant to make others do what you want them to do, but boundaries make it safe for you to be yourself. So I appreciate that you just said that, because it confirmed his thoughts, and and I thought that was great, because as you said, boundaries are weaponized. It's like and especially when we're talking about individuals who are dealing with domestic violence, it's like you get punished for trying to stand up for yourself. You get punished for trying to reclaim your life, to reclaim your dignity. And it's a horrible thing. But it should not be a weapon when I just stand up for myself, not trying to control an outcome, a situation, or a person, but doing what I need to do to make myself feel safe. And having said that, Mark, I want to ask you, because I've dealt with this a couple times in the past couple weeks. It's as if I've literally needed to give some individuals permission, quote unquote, to set boundaries for themselves who are dealing with abusive situations. It's like they needed to hear someone say, you know what? You don't have to answer your phone. You don't have to answer that question. You don't have to have a conversation with that person. You don't have to go to that place. So can you speak to that issue of the individual really feeling like you need permission to take care of yourself, to set a boundary for yourself?
Sure.
I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know where that comes from.
I mean, I love where you're going with it, because I mean, we're throwing the first 15 minutes here have been throwing around some great concepts for people who know how to handle themselves in tough situations. And it's good. It's affirming. It's good to hear that. Okay, rock on. I'm going back out there and I'm going to knock it out of the park. But more often than not, what we're talking about is people with, let's call it what it is, low self-esteem. And they can be manipulated. And where you were going with that earlier, somebody talking to you and telling you, no, you don't get to do this. You don't get to do this. Assertiveness, that takes an amount of confidence in yourself to be able to say, no, you don't do this. I don't behave this way. And, I'm going to date myself here, but I'm thinking of Aretha Franklin, right? RESPECT, right?
Timeless. Timeless.
This is so many of the world's problems. If we stopped and do unto others as have done unto you, we would be putting a lot of these. We'd be out of a job here, right? We wouldn't be talking about these things. It'd be great. This unemployment I can handle, So it's we have to be acknowledging that people with low self-esteem have to be able to trust someone enough to be able to be vulnerable, and then that person is not taken advantage of. That's hard, because by definition, they're always going to take the second class status. They're going to take the road of trying to show that I'm valuable, show that I am worth something, show that, to demonstrate to the other side. No, this is something within yourself that you have to say. And if you're a person of faith, this comes a little easier, right? God has confidence in me. God believes in me. I can draw strength from that, right? But if someone doesn't have a faith system, or someone doesn't have, or has been, a dear friend of mine out in California, she was molested by her father, by her brother, and by an uncle. She had men issues. Understandably so. So I mean, how do you get past that? How do you get past that? That is incredible. And so this is where the rubber hits the road. You've got to be having, there may be serious counseling, as in her case, there may be serious counseling needed before you can even get to that point where no becomes an option and assertiveness becomes something that is viable in your vocabulary. So this is what we have to do, is we have to be on the lookout for people who aren't capable of defending themselves. Aren't in a place yet at this point in their life. Doesn't mean they're not going to get there. And I love the idea of the changing boundaries. Well, not only changing boundaries as we go through different stages of life, but within very relationships as they exist right now. You have different boundaries for a spouse than you do that your children, a friendship, a coworker, fellow students. There are plenty of different boundaries. Someone that I've known for 30 years, has a lot more leeway than someone I've known for 30 days.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And quick, I don't want to suck up all the oxygen in the room, but it's even cultural. I mean, I'm very much a person from the East Coast. I grew up in New York City. I've said that before in here. I grew up in New York City, and New York's a tough city. It's a tough place, but it's also a great place. And I remember I went to college in California. And just the difference in the mentality between the East and West Coast. Here's a quick example. I would walk into a friend's house and I would go to the refrigerator and I'd open up and I'd take out, you never take the last of anything in someone's refrigerator. But if they have a 6-pack of Coke or something, you take a Coke, but you bring it over next time, you bring a 6-pack if so that was, it all washes, and that's the way I grew up, and nobody ever thought twice about it. When I went to California, I brought that with me, 18, 19-year-old kid going out there. And I would just, friends, I would walk over and I'd open up the refrigerator. Well, unbeknownst to me, this was causing a great deal of consternation with people who would not say anything to me, but were saying a lot of things about me. And I was like, why didn't you say something? If that's a problem, why didn't you just say something? I'm not here to rob you of food. That's not what I'm doing. I'm going to bring it over, not every day, but, once a week, I'll bring over some Coke or some Pepsi, whatever it is you like, but it's interesting because it's just a cultural thing. And that's a very minor point, but it caused a good deal of discussion and setting boundaries, and I was out of my cultural element. Now, so my point is that this can go across the board in many different directions. Serious stuff and minor stuff, which is what I'm describing here. But it is all the same because it's very much communication, right? Shouldn't be hiding behind the sink going, can you believe what he just did? That's no good for a growing relationship either. Got to say, hey, whoa, knock yourself out. But next time, please ask first. I am so sorry. I'm dumb, but I'm not stupid. I would not do something like that if I knew I was offending people. So,
well, Mark, thank you so much for that story. I think that goes into my next thought. And Nicole, I would ask if you would expound on it. Boundaries are not boundaries if you don't enforce them. So now my kids can come and go in a refrigerator and do whatever. They really can. My kids come in the house and go upstairs and go lay down in my bed. Those are my kids. My kids can do that. Even a friend, as much as I may love you, you can't just walk in my house and go in my bedroom and get in the bed. Right. Now there are some things that you should just know. Don't put your hands on me. Don't yell at me. But there are times where it may be an incident like the soda in the fridge, and it could be volatile, more serious. But boundaries are not boundaries if you don't enforce them. Boundaries are not boundaries if you don't speak up on them, if you don't say anything. So like Mark said, don't stand over by the kitchen sink whispering about me going in a refrigerator. And if I honestly didn't know, tell me. Right. Talk to me. And the difference between abuse and someone making an honest mistake, because if it's honestly, look, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, I didn't mean it. When it's abuse, I don't care what you said. I don't care. And not only that, but it's your fault. however however it happened, it was you. I don't care. But that's not what a healthy, normal person would say to you. But also on the other side, boundaries are not boundaries if you don't enforce them. So when you say, "Don't speak to me this way," you can't go back and roll back on that and change your mind. You need to enforce that. So what's going to happen if you raise your voice? I'm leaving. This conversation is over. Now, if it happens that the conversation continues to go, guess what's going to happen? You're going to continue to be yelled at. You're going to continue to be called out of your name. If we continually show up for dinner and you don't have your money to pay for it, and I keep paying the bill, guess what's going to happen? So the boundary is, I'm not paying for you for this whole group when we go out. So you have to enforce it. Now there are some things. All right, I'll give you that first one.
Right.
But when you're talking about abuse, you have to open your mouth. You have to speak. Again, I understand you have to do what is safe for you to do, and you know what that is. But you have to be able to speak up. If you don't enforce them, they don't mean anything. So, Nicole.
I mean, I feel like you really answered what you said, the question, but excuse me. I think that it's important. Well, what helps, especially if you already have in a space where have low self-esteem or you're not as strong in making your stance, is having allies. So if another person is there that you can lean on or you can pull or reach out to, who can also help reinforce what you're sharing. And if it's not in the moment, even if it's later, okay, I'm going to this person and I'm confiding in them. I need a little help. Asking for help, being open for help and assistance, which I know is hard too, especially in domestic violence situations where you're isolated a lot of times. So I think that I can speak better towards being an ally, and in that space, really being more attentive to people and being willing to step in and say something, and to speak up on someone else's behalf, or just be willing to listen and available. And like you mentioned earlier, providing that permission. It's okay for you to block their number. You don't have to respond right away. You can leave the room if it's, a smaller situation, but, just speaking to those things and being a stronger voice or a more present ally to those who don't have it yet. They don't have yet the vocabulary or the strength.
So thank you so much for sharing that. And I love what you said. And I believe Jen alluded to this earlier. I think part of boundaries is having your safe circle around you. So especially when we're dealing with domestic violence, you need to know who your support group is. And so there are times when you need to sit with your people, your team, your loved ones, those who have you, and go over your boundaries. It's okay. Because it could be, am I just being unfair about this? Or, is this just something that I really need to do and I just need to talk it out and I need to hear some support behind it? I mean, I would, 2-3 hours ago, I called Nicole because I'm like, I got a situation over here. Like but I talked to her. I mean, there are times, I've reached out to Mark and I said, this is what's happening. This is what's going on in my mind, my safe circle. Because I know that I'm surrounded with people who will say, you need to calm down a little bit, or you're right on target, or take a few minutes first. Take a couple days first before you come to a final decision on whatever it is. So in setting some boundaries, there's a safe space that I have that I can go to and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm feeling. And then also, I think it's very healthy for individuals to know what your boundaries are, because as Nicole said, if you're out and about, then you have somebody in your team who will stand up for you, who will know what your boundary is. And like, we're not doing it. We're going to stop that. Who will support you? So I think part of it is making sure that you have your circle around you, your support group, not yes people who just
Right.
go along with anything you want, anything you say, not people who are just overly critical, but people who love you. And I would say people who understand what you're dealing with, because domestic violence is a whole animal by itself. So, if I'm coming to you, talking to you about a specific issue, like my circle, like they know my history, they know what's behind it. So I think that support is there. That support should be there, from your circle, from your group. I wanted to go back to something that Jen was saying, and Mark, I'll ask you if you want to expand on it. But boundaries are not about revenge. Boundaries are not about getting back at people or punishing the perpetrator. That's a whole waste of time if that's your thought, and it's not going to work. Again, boundaries are for your own safety, but if you are trying to conduct a scenario and you think the perpetrator is going to feel bad or be embarrassed or be ashamed or be punished because you put this in place, I want to dispel that myth right now.
Looks like we're taking turns losing people tonight.
Yes, no. Actually,
this
I thought it
seems
was
like
me for a second. I'm like,
Opportune moment to step in. Anyone have a comment to that, or?
no, please.
Wow.
Yeah.
I forgot my thought.
That was
Retribution is a no-go. That was your thought in a sentence.
Okay, that's it.
Revenge is bad.
And then I'll just go right to Mark before I cut off again.
Well, I couldn't agree more.
Right?
I could
Do
not
think
agree
that
more.
They're going to care, because they're not. If they did whatever they did to hurt you in the first place, don't think that you're going to do anything to make them all of a sudden feel bad. So, Mark.
Well, I mean, why would you want to become the enemy, right? I mean, if someone is controlling you, if someone's manipulating you, if someone's hurting you, if someone's overstepping and disrespecting you, why would you want to turn that table and do that to them? And I understand that maybe, and I'm not naive. I know that there's a human component that does like revenge. I'm not naive enough to think that isn't the case. But I mean, in reality, revenge does not taste sweet. Mm-hmm. And why do you want to diminish yourself by doing what was done to you? How is that in your interests? And I think, take the moral high ground. They say a measure of a person is what they do when no one's looking. And so, and what you have to do is you take the high ground, and the hardest lesson in life that has to constantly be learned again and again is that you cannot control someone else. So you may get a momentary buzz by taking advantage or turning the tables or whatever phrase you want to use. But again, it's not in your interests, right? We don't want to get off this planet with some degree of self-respect. And it's not happening when you do that. The corollary to that, little kind of a side direction of it. But when you were talking, I was thinking there's an old saying: "Fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me." Mm-hmm. And so when you were saying, the first time you do it, I'll give you that. And I agree with that approach. I'm very open, very vulnerable. Leave yourself open for attack. I'm a firm believer in that. But once you do it, I never forget. And I will have the conversation, say, that's not acceptable. You don't do that. And it goes one of two ways. Either I'm sorry, or I'm sorry and I do it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which means you weren't sorry in the first place.
And so actions speak louder than words. So stop, now the words have to be said. That's important. Mm-hmm. But the words in and of themselves don't really matter all that much. Mm-hmm. When you do the same thing again and again and again, you're actually speaking volumes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this is where, and I love the idea of being an ally of that inner circle but again, self-esteem, people with low self-esteem don't always have a strong network of people around them. They
Mhm.
don't always have allies. They don't always have people that they can depend on. That takes a long time and a lot of open vulnerability that's not taken advantage of.
Right.
A lot of times vulnerability is taken advantage of.
Mhm.
And so all that does is reinforce the negative. So again, how do you reach people who are so turned off by other people because of their experiences? And by the way, I'm not sitting here saying, here's ABC, this is what you do. I mean, because each case is individual. Each
Yeah.
case, every person is a unique creation, and every one of us reacts differently. So this is a work in progress with no firm rules other than going back to that RESPECT stuff, right? I mean, where we really need to be that ally, that trusting person, that one that can be the confidant and give that sage advice, not a yes man or a yes woman, but that sage advice saying, yeah, this is no, I'm not reading it the way you're reading it. You're hopeful that this person is going to change, but when they've done that to you 27 times, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a 28.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll go to Vegas with that.
So thank you so much, Mark. And I love what you said. Actions speak louder than words. So, Jen, I would give you that thought and ask you to expound on that, because also boundaries are not boundaries if you continually change them without seeing a healthy change for the reason you set that boundary in the first place. Right? Does that make
Like
sense?
basically not enforcing your boundaries.
Like, I mean, if you don't enforce it, or if you change it, like if I tell you, don't call me after 10 o'clock, that's too late. Like that's my boundary. Don't call me after 10 o'clock. If you continually call me after 10 p.m. and I keep answering my phone,
Right.
like you know what I mean? If I set this boundary, but you have not proven yourself,
Yeah.
you've not done whatever it is I needed you to do in a healthy way.
Yeah.
You know, that's no incentive for a person to respect you.
No, not at all. And I think it definitely goes back to what Mark said about low self-esteem and a low self-worth. And listen, like I'll get vulnerable right now. Like I really struggle with the idea of being needed, right? I think that's something that, we want to feel valuable to other people. And so sometimes there's this thought of like, if someone subconsciously, right? Because like I can sit here and tell you all day that boundaries are important and they need to be enforced. But when it comes down to it and it's somebody that I'm in relationship with and they continue to cross the boundary, but instead of looking at it as a act of disrespect towards me, I see it as, well, they just really need me. Then I'm only doing myself a disservice, right? I mean, it's not an excuse to cross the boundary, and nobody needs you that much, like nobody needs to be consistently crossing your boundaries and disrespecting them, because it is disrespectful. I think we get into, I don't think that every boundary crosser is malicious, right? I think that we grow up in systems of dysfunction and it becomes normalized and we are very comfortable operating in them. I think that generationally that happens, because I will tell you, like, I never heard of a boundary till I went to therapy. Like, that wasn't something I grew up hearing about, was like, set your boundaries. So I think once again, it's a complicated thing. It's not complicated in theory, but it is in practice, because once you deal with actual people, you're not mostly enforcing boundaries with people that you don't care about, right? Like you're enforcing them with people you're in close relationship with. And some of those people you want to stay in close relationship with. Not all boundaries are like distance boundaries, right? Like I don't want to have you in my life boundaries. Some of them are, please don't call me after 10 p.m. That doesn't mean I don't want you in my life, that you're not an important part of my life. It's just that that's a really bad time for me. I don't stay up that late, whatever the reasoning is, it doesn't really matter. But I think, just like boundaries can be weaponized to use them against people, I think the opposite can be true as well, which is that we don't actually take our own boundaries seriously enough. We're ready with excuses to say they didn't mean it in a bad way, or like, they had a really bad week, so like it's okay this time. And like you already alluded to, that doesn't what all that shows is that you're okay being disrespected. I mean, at the end of the day, that's really what it shows.
Yeah.
Again, not out of a place of maliciousness or, somebody hating you or trying to hurt you. But at the end of the day, that's what's happening, right? Like, you're not getting better. Your relationship certainly isn't getting better. You don't feel closer to them when they're constantly crossing your boundaries. And like Mark said earlier, they may not really be realizing that they're consistently crossing your boundaries if you're not enforcing them.
Mhm.
So if you say, don't call me after 10 p.m., but you pick up every time they call after 10 p.m., again, actions speak louder than words. So
Yes, absolutely, on both sides. And throughout this conversation, I don't want to imply that abuse or domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, that these things wouldn't happen if boundaries were in place, because that is not the case. There are several cases and situations where boundaries were set and followed, and abuse or criminal activity occurred in spite of the boundaries and precautions. But that doesn't mean you throw it to the wind. So I still really want to emphasize the point that setting and following boundaries can be helpful and can be protective, and it should be a part of our safety mechanisms, especially when we know we're already in a situation dealing with domestic violence or dealing with sexual assault. If you know that that is the area that you're in, then absolutely inserting boundaries can be helpful. And again, there are situations where you can't. And if you can't, then that means that you are in a very serious and terrible situation.
Yeah.
And so I encourage individuals to seek out whatever help you need. Call the domestic violence hotlines. Go to an agency, look up the websites, get the information that you need. Go to an individual that you trust, your circle, your support group. Do what it is that you need to do. You know what steps you can safely take. So do that. But by no means do I want to say that, if we all had boundaries, the world would be great. That's not the case. We're not living in la la land. But I believe that boundaries are helpful. I believe that boundaries are necessary. And I believe if you start, even in the smallest spot, if you start somewhere and you just keep growing within yourself, you'll get to that healthy place and where you are. Again, I know this is a wide topic, as we said before. I mean, and this is a topic that we've covered several times, but boundaries are important. Boundaries, unfortunately, as Jen said, it's a word that some of us did not hear until we became adults. Some of us didn't hear it until we went into therapy. Some of us didn't hear it until, unfortunately, we were already hurt and we were trying to heal. But if we could be preventative, that's it. I think that's a good word. I think boundaries can help to be preventative of a lot of harm that could come into our lives. And you are worth it. I really want to say that. That's the last thing that I want to say. And, before everyone else shares, you are worth it to set a boundary. And whatever your boundary is, you don't have to explain it to anyone. I don't have to tell you why I don't want you calling me after 10 p.m. I really don't have to explain why I don't want you yelling in my face. And, some things you should already know. Some things are self-explanatory, but I don't have to give details for why I am doing what I do to protect myself. And some of us are you are in a healthy place and you want to stay in that healthy place. Boundaries will help you stay in that healthy place as opposed to being hurt and broken trying to recover using boundaries to heal. We want to be in that preventative place. Um, so I thank you all for being here with us tonight. But as we close, I would ask you all to give your final thoughts on boundaries. Nicole, we'll start with you.
Sure. I just think this is such an important topic, and as everyone has said, it's so broad and can expand to so many different things. So, like you said, just really keeping in mind your value, that you are worth it, that you are loved, um, and that stand on respecting yourself. That Aretha Franklin RESPECT that was mentioned so many times in this episode, but also from an ally's standpoint, wanting to reiterate being a safe space. Um, just as the golden rule was mentioned, be unto others as you want people to be unto you. Keeping that in mind, if you are one who wants to be an ally or you feel you can be an ally, to provide the safe space, the type of safe space that you would want to receive if you were in that situation.
Thank you. Jen?
Yeah, I feel like we could talk for 4 more hours plus about this. So, the one thing that for some reason I've been coming at this from like a very non-trauma place today. I don't know why. Like, obviously domestic violence is what the show is about, and so setting boundaries, as you have said multiple times, Tia, within the context of domestic violence or abuse is very different than outside of it. But for whatever reason, that's on my heart today. So, when we talk about weaponizing boundaries too, I just want to mention that boundaries should never be an excuse for you not to heal. And so, keep pursuing yourself, keep pursuing your healing. And I think that goes to the conversation around self-esteem and value is that, you don't use boundaries as something to hide behind. You use them to empower yourself, but in a way that is for you and not in a way to control others or to control others' perception of you, but in a way to keep pursuing yourself and your own value and your own worth and to just grow and get stronger.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, Mark, if you would give us your final thoughts on boundaries and close us out for the evening.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, everything that's being said here is just so spot on. I mean, and it, uh, we need to be very conscious. Again, clear-eyed is what I'm thinking here, about the relationships that we're in, and for the people with, who suffer from that low self-esteem or trying to find that. The word of advice that I would put out there is watch, because if you may think you can trust a person, but if they're talking about other people, if they're demeaning other people, if they're stepping over boundaries with other people, they're going to do it to you. And you may believe you can trust them. You may want to trust them. You may think you can trust them, but be real clear-eyed, and look at it, and just if they're doing it to other people, they're going to do it to you. And you're absolutely right when you point out every single one of us are worth it. Everyone is of value. Every human life is of the utmost importance. So please don't squander it. Don't feel that, be vulnerable. Be vulnerable, but be careful who you're being vulnerable with, because you're absolutely right. There are people out there who will take that vulnerability and exploit it and crush you. And then you will do exactly what they want, because you will become subservient. You will give up on other people. You will give up on hope. You will give up on love. And that's when they can control you the most. So, just clear-eyed is the message I want to just send, and take away from this evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate this conversation. Again, we've had this conversation several times on boundaries, but I don't think it can be exhausted. I think there's always a new beam of light to shed on it. So again, I thank you all so much for being here tonight. Love Bay, if you want to catch up on previous episodes of our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. Please also remember to like, share, and subscribe via whichever platform you're watching us by. Thank you so much for joining Suffering in Silence with Pastor Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. Love Bay, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. Good evening.
Good evening.